welcome to another episode of the Project Purple podcast. I'm Dino Verley, founder and CEO of Project Purple. We have an exciting interview coming up with a very special guest after a few quick updates. Since 2010, we've contributed over $3 million and counting to pancreatic cancer research efforts. That's actually closer to $4 million now after our recent announcements here. And we're going to talk a lot about research today on this podcast episode. We've also allocated over $1 million worth of aid to more than 1,300 patients and families through our patient aid programs. Your monthly or one-time gift can improve patients' lives through research and assistance programs. You can donate now at projectpurple.org. Pancreatic cancer does not rest, and neither will we. Your support is truly appreciated. If you're looking to get involved in one of our events, whether that means joining a run team, participating in a virtual run walk, group fitness, golf, or anything else you can think of, visit projectpurple.org/events to learn more. I'd like to introduce today's special guest coming to us all the way from Durham, North Carolina at Duke University, Dr. Peter Allen, who is professor of surgery, chief division of surgical oncology, health system vice president for cancer services, and member of the Duke Cancer Institute. Dr. Peter Allen, welcome to the Project Purple podcast.
Yeah, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, I'm excited. I know we've known each other for a couple of years. So there's a lot of these sayings I say in this podcast. Before we hit record, we're nearing almost 7 years of the podcast, over 300 episodes. So I say things like full disclosure, like it's not full disclosure here. We always are transparent, but we've known each other for quite some time. I say the last couple of years. You are also the first recipient, which I get super excited about for a lot of reasons, but you are the first recipient of the Pantelitis Family Research Grant here at Project Purple, which was a grant that we established 2 years ago in honor of the Pantelitis family and really in honor of James Pantelitis, who is a person you knew well through your experience and what you do and Jim's journey with pancreatic cancer. And you were recipient of the first ever research grant from that fund. So super excited to bring you to our community and to share with the community at large, not only what you're doing with that grant, but also what you're doing in the pancreatic cancer community as a whole. You've been in this space a lot longer than I have. Not that we're going to ask you how old you are on the podcast, but you've been at it a little bit longer and doing some great things. So I'm super excited to have you here on the podcast, and I'm going to hand it off to you because we shouldn't assume that everyone knows your background and where you came from. To share a little bit with our audience, kind of, you're at Duke now, but you weren't at Duke for the last, for your whole career. So let's share with our audience a little bit of your background and also hopefully we'll get in there somewhere, like why you got into pancreatic cancer or GI cancer as a whole. So with that, I'm going to pass it off to you, Peter.
Sure. Thanks, Dino. I guess I have to say I'm a little disappointed that it took you 300 episodes to get me invited on your podcast, but we'll talk.
You're a tough guy to schedule.
We'll talk about that later, but thank you. Project Purple, what a great job that you are doing, and your commitment and tenacity and, just elevates everybody's game. So I want to thank you personally for everything that you're doing. And I thank the Pantelitis family. I knew Jim for a long time. Unbelievable human being. Just an amazing person. And as many amazing people, he was surrounded by an amazing family and amazing friends. So I really want to appreciate the family and also respect what they've done to try to bring some closure or beginnings of closure to this horrible disease. As you mentioned, I've been at it for a while, and I never thought that I'd be talking to you from North Carolina. I'm from the Northeast originally, from the great state of Maine. Go Cooper Flag. And after spending time in the military, when I was actually in Washington, D.C. at Walter Reed for quite some period of time, the beginning of my career, I went back to Sloan Kettering, where I had done research and my clinical fellowship to start my career. And I started it in pancreatic cancer, in a way, at that time, which was almost 20 years ago, pancreatic cancer was a bad disease as it is now, but it was actually a fairly uncommon disease, unlike it is becoming now. And that's something we can chat about as well, as just the increased incidence of pancreatic cancer in the United States. But I started studying pancreatic cancer, and actually, what I would say I became most interested in is studying precursor lesions of pancreatic cancer. Actual findings that we can identify in a patient's pancreas that are considered pre-cancerous, and really focusing on studying those lesions to understand in a better way how pancreatic cancer develops, and hopefully how we may be able to even prevent it from developing in certain patients. So that's where I really started, and I spent over a decade at Sloan and in New York, and love Sloan Kettering. It's a great organization and continues to be a great organization. But about 4 or 5 years ago now, as you mentioned, I came down here to Duke University and the Duke Cancer Institute. Also a great organization with a great past, and started working down here, leading our surgical oncology efforts, now leading our clinical cancer efforts within the Cancer Center, and developing our pancreatic cancer research space. And so it's been a whole load of fun to be down here with great opportunities, new challenges, and on top of everything else, a great basketball team to watch.
I love the basketball reference in there. Well, I think it's, I've followed your career, and I know you're joking. Well, maybe you weren't joking about, taking this long to get on the podcast, but, I've followed your career for quite some time. Remember when you were at Sloan, not only from Jim, but also from other families that we've interacted. And, I've always said, like, it's great that, like, Memorial Sloan Kettering is a great place, right? And there's great clinicians there, but it's also really awesome. Probably not the best term, but really exciting maybe to see clinicians like yourself go and build elsewhere, which is, I think, one of the things. I know before we hit record here, we were talking about, like, hey, there's so much happening in this space. And I feel like, so I've been in this going on almost 15 years, right? And I remember, like, 15 years ago, and I just remember even maybe a little bit further, like 18 years ago, when my dad was going through that journey. Like, we lived here in Connecticut, and it was like either you go to Sloan or you had to go up to Boston. Like, Yale really wasn't a place to go. And, now it's exciting that there are opportunities for other communities, right? Like, we've seen people venture off and build and grow. And you're one of those people, right? That, you took a chance going down south. I'm sure your wife and your family, this is a big, going from New York City down to Durham is a big lifestyle change. But the opportunity to now to build in what you've done there and bring other pieces into there. And I've seen, from our standpoint, because I've been down to Duke to see your lab and meet the kids. I say kids because some of them are students, really, really talented students, and the other folks in the lab, the adults in the lab that are doing this full time is just really, like, it's so inspiring. And I get so jazzed when we have this opportunity. But to know, though, Dr. Allen, that now the Durham community and North Carolina as a whole has this expertise is just so awesome. And it's just awesome to see that. And we've seen that in other parts of the country where, again, 18 years ago, you didn't have that.
Yeah, you're right. And a lot of the organizations such as Sloan Kettering, MD Anderson Cancer Center, and others have, through their training of future physicians, whether that be medical oncologists, surgical oncologists, or radiation oncologists, have really, populated the country and the world with oncologists who are playing at the top of their game and delivering great care and generating novel research at their own institutions.
Yeah, and I think it's a testament too to the leadership at Duke. I mean, Duke is by no means. I mean, they've got a wealth of history of advancements in cancer, but I guess selfishly for pancreatic cancer, I always look at everything as pancreatic cancer, right? That where they made the commitment to this disease is just so awesome. And there's other places too that have done that. And I think, hopefully partly some of that's like the leadership in a lot of these major cancer centers in major cities realizing like, hey, this is becoming a problem. We need to invest in this to support the community as a whole. But also, I guess I'll give myself a pat on the back, like groups like ourselves, like we're not, there's other groups that are a lot bigger that are also making investments into those programs throughout the country to, push science along in terms of research, which is good to see from the advocacy standpoint, right? Like those groups are seeing that and realizing those opportunities for young researchers or new researchers or researchers from those major centers starting their labs elsewhere, which is just awesome because we need more of that.
Yeah, completely agree. And I think that in the line of thought around going from one organization to another, I think it's more common now. I think 20 years ago, a lot of physicians and physician scientists might stay at one organization for their career. I think now it's much more common for people to move. I think the greatest opportunity for me was to learn more and to change perspective. Sloan's a great place, but you really generate a single perspective there. And that perspective is developed over decades of an institution's approach to disease, its patient population, its geographical location, whether it's in a very urban or rural environment. And you do have these biases towards your approach to disease, as well as research in that disease that's institutionally driven, if you will. And for me, I've been there for about 14 years. I just felt like my learning had plateaued a bit, that yes, it's a great place. I could continue to have a great career there, but I really wasn't, month over month, year over year, just developing new skill sets, new approaches, and new viewpoints of disease. And so Duke provided that opportunity, and I think it has been a great opportunity because of the differences. The differences are location, patient population, as well as our own institutional structure. Sloan Kettering is not a university system; it is a private hospital, and we're a university system that sits on a campus with engineers, business school students, health policy students, school of population health, undergraduate students like you met in my lab, that we interact with every single day because we actually sit on the undergraduate campus. If I were to open that screen back there, you'd see the Duke Chapel.
Yeah.
And so that is, to me, really energizing to be in that type of a community and sort of change my perspective on this disease. And I think help me improve not only the research that I'm involved with in doing, but also in patient care.
I love it. I love it. And that was something I know you and I, when one of the site visits, you talked about just the diversity in the research as well, right? Like, and that's something I think you and I have had a lot of conversations off the record, and, in terms of like, hey, how do we move this thing forward, and sometimes thinking outside the box, but like, if you're if your environment allows you, to meet engineers and to meet all these other expertise, like then now those ideas, and I've seen this at other academic, and that's where I feel very strongly like the researchers in that academic setting have such a leg up on just, and I'm not saying that research that's just siloed in a cancer center, is any worse or any better, but like, I think there's the opportunity to think outside the box from other experts is more, it germinates more likely in the university setting than it would in a cancer setting because you're in that siloed box of just cancer, cancer, cancer.
Yeah, I mean, the analogy I use for friends and colleagues who are asking me the differences between an academic university system like Duke versus a place like Sloan Kettering is I say it's picture the differences between Tesla and GM. Tesla, sort of single product line, one brand, very niche, kind of sexy. GM, massive organization, multiple product lines, does lots of different things very well. Not quite as niche, maybe not as sexy, but really covers all the bases and probably, delivers a lot more cars to a lot more people. So I think to me, that's sort of the analogy that fits in, that Memorial is very niche, very focused. But if you want to get somebody who builds a vehicle with a gas engine, you just can't do it at Tesla. And so that's the challenge.
I love it. I love it. And I drive a Chevy, so that is with me. My question here, first question here, and I ask this always for clinicians. What about pancreatic cancer got you into pancreatic cancer? Why that disease specific?
Yeah, and I would have to say that it's a pretty mundane answer for me. I did not have a personal connection to pancreatic cancer like a lot of people who end up going into this space do. I was really interested in cancer biology, and pancreatic cancer has, I believe, a very unique biology in its ability to metastasize extremely early. And also, it just has to do when you're looking for a job, what jobs are available. And it just so happened when I was looking for a job, Sloan had a job for me in the pancreas cancer space. I'm also a surgeon, so we, operate on patients with pancreatic cancer, and the operative approaches to pancreatic cancer when I started had dramatically improved, but required further refinement. And I thought that was an additional opportunity to learn and to improve patient care, just actually in the technical aspects of surgery for pancreatic cancer. So I think it was just a combination of my interests on top of what's available at the time that you're looking for a job.
Well, I'm thankful that there was a job available in the pancreatic cancer space because it, like I said, it's been great to have you in this space. And I know you've become kind of a world leader in surgery for what you've been able to do. So let's talk about that. Now, you've been at Duke for a couple years. This is kind of like you said a bit, really unique opportunity because of the fact that it's on a university. You've got access to all these other expertise, but then also students. Talk a little bit about the lab and then some of the things you're focusing in, and then maybe let's get into a little bit of the work with the Pantelitis research grant.
Sure. Well, as we were chatting about earlier, I do think the next 5 to 10 years are going to be remarkable for pancreas cancer for a variety of reasons. Some of those are pancreas cancer specific, and I think others of those are just cancer specific and not necessarily have to do with pancreas. I think probably the biggest advance right now in pancreas cancer is going to be the discovery of the ability to block the mutation, the RAS mutation, that is nearly ubiquitous in pancreas cancer patients. And that, for many, many years, was thought to be a protein that could not be targeted, could not be drugged. And over the past several years, it's been remarkable as to how they've developed drugs to block this abnormality, and it will be uniquely helpful in pancreas cancer. And so I think that is probably the greatest pancreas cancer specific event that has occurred. And then I think the other cancer events that have occurred that are really important right now is some of the traction that we're getting in vaccine development, that vaccine development for cancers, and pancreas cancer being one of them, is one where I believe we're finding ways to unlock the immune system to attack an individual's cancer. We're also looking at ways of training your own immune system through what's called cellular therapy to attack pancreatic cancer. And this approach had been developed initially for lymphomas and leukemias and diseases like that, but now it's being translated to pancreatic cancer, and is another thing that to me is very exciting. In the lab, I again remain really focused on precursor lesions of pancreatic cancer. And these are cysts, fluid-filled cysts that can be detected in a person's pancreas that over time can become cancerous. And indeed, probably 15 to 20% of pancreatic cancer is developed through this process. And it's been a huge clinical problem for us. Because if you walk out of your office today and trip and fall on the sidewalk and somebody drags you into your local emergency department, you will likely leave that emergency department having had a very high quality, contrast enhanced CT scan of your abdomen, which will detect any abnormality that is in your belly, including a small cyst that is in your pancreas. And if we scan all 70-year-olds, about 10% of those patients will have one of these precancerous cysts in their pancreas. So the clinical challenge has always been, how do you identify which of those cysts are at greatest risk of becoming cancer? How do you remove them before they become cancer? How do you not operate on too many patients while not miss a cancer being developed? And this in a process that, although it increases your likelihood of developing pancreas cancer, the vast majority of the patients who have these will never develop cancer. So it's been a very difficult clinical challenge, and one that we've brought a lot of this work into the laboratory, and Project Purple's helping us with a specific project where we're trying to identify proteins within that cyst fluid that could help us predict which of those cysts are at risk. So therefore, they either need to be removed or followed very closely, and which of those cysts are not at risk and could be easily monitored or even forgotten about.
I know the term like early detection. So this kind of like, I know I think as a whole, but correct me if I'm wrong here, Dr. Allen, this is like preventative.
Yeah.
Even before early detection, because
yeah,
I guess early detection in my mind is like you catch it at, like you're able to catch it at the early stages. But what we're talking here, and I know I have seen a bit of a shift over the last, like, I think 3 to 4 years here, where there's been a lot more dialogue about prevention, right? Like, how do you prevent these cancers? And you mentioned the vaccines. I mean, the vaccines are in that same, I think, vein of like, hey, you have this gene, you have this marker, you take this vaccine, and just like you would the measles or the flu, right? In theory, is like you would prevent those things from happening. So this is along that same vein of prevention of cancer versus early detection of cancer.
Absolutely. And I think that's a critical thing to point to differentiate. Early detection in general is talking about diagnosing a cancer at its smallest size, its earliest stage. And the challenge with pancreatic cancer is because it metastasizes so early, because it sheds cells into the body so early, that even when we detect it at the earliest stage, the majority of those patients will still ultimately recur and die of their cancer after being treated with surgery and chemotherapy. And so that's the limitation, at least right now, with early detection in pancreatic cancer. So we shifted our focus many years ago to prevention of the development of cancer in patients who have high risk cystic precursor lesions of pancreatic cancer. We've studied these lesions extensively. We actually are running a clinical trial right now in this group of patients who are at highest risk for developing cancer, and treating patients with an anti-inflammatory agent versus placebo to see if by settling down inflammation in the pancreas, we could potentially prevent a patient from developing a pancreas cancer.
It's awesome. I get so inspired from these talks because there's, as we said, there's so much happening, and this is what this space needs. Like this space needs like that jolt of like a million things happening in a positive way, and this is just phenomenal that these things are happening at Duke, and we're part of it. We're blessed to be part of it, but for the community as a whole, as I said, down there in North Carolina, I know you get patients from all over the country, but for those folks there in North Carolina, it's just amazing what you've been able to build in such a short time. But it's an exciting time because there's so many good things happening. I truly do believe we're kind of on that, maybe a tipping point where we'll start to see some of these massive, enhancements. And then the numbers, will start to jump more so than they have in the past, because we've seen like this little incremental increase every year, which is super frustrating. And everyone's waiting for that 5% jump or that 10% jump. But I feel we're so close. We're so close to that happening.
It's coming.
Yeah. Question for you here. Given your experience, and I know you've got that, interest in biology and really understanding this. And now as we talk about like these, these cysts and these lesions and doing this in a preventative state, I've asked this question to many clinicians. Do you feel like we're going down the road, and you're probably at Sloan, when this concept of precision medicine, like individualized treatment protocols, care, drugs, therapy for each individual patient, do you feel that's like where we need to go with pancreatic cancer because of the complexity in the biology of the disease?
Well, I think it'll be a combination of things. First of all, I think the more we can do to treat the cancer once it's developed, the better off we'll be, without a doubt. The more applicable surgery will be, the more applicable other treatments will be when we have whole body treatments that are effective at killing disseminated cancer cells. So I do think that remains a critical aspect of it. However, I would say that there's a lot of interest in this concept of interception is really what it is. It's risk detection and interception, preventing an abnormality from progressing towards a cancer. And I think we're just starting to develop some standardized and broad concepts towards prevention and interception. And so to me, I believe that's also a real part of the future. So part of the work that Project Purple and Panelitas family supporting here is that we're hoping that when somebody has a scan and they find one of these pancreatic cancer precursor cysts in their pancreas, generally called IPMN, when they find that, we would like the ability to do a test where they put a small needle into that cyst and pull some fluid out, and we can analyze that fluid and actually predict the long-term fate of that lesion. We're starting to find some signal that we're probably able to predict the long-term future, be that 5 years, 10 years, what have you, of these lesions by analyzing how their cells are behaving. And that would be wonderful, right? For us to be able to do that on patients who get a scan, have a cyst, they're told it's potentially a precursor of pancreas cancer, lots of panic sets in, that we could do a relatively basic test to predict the long-term fate of that lesion. And that's another equally as important area we're headed in that I think will have uh, be very meaningful to many patients.
I love it. I love it. I got a couple questions here left, and then we're gonna share where our audience can learn more about the great things you guys are doing at Duke down there for pancreatic cancer. Question here, and it's on this same note that you just mentioned about doing these things. You are Superman, but you do have a wonderful team there. Talk a little bit. I find personally, like I've met surgeons. And what's interesting, like you're talking about prevention, which we know surgery is the one option. So I'm just going to make a statement here first. This just came into my mind here when you were talking about this. Like we're talking about preventing surgeries, and here you are, a surgeon who gets paid to do surgery. So just the person you are, the audience listening and watching here, like hopefully they caught on to that. Is like, wait a minute, like surgery is the one solution that we have for this disease to get rid of it, right? But you're talking about avoiding surgery, which is just a testament to the person you are and the career that you've created here, Dr. Allen. But so I've met, there's either people that are in it to do surgery, and there's no right or wrong here. And then you have people who are in it, like yourself, to mentor and to bring on people. As I mentioned, I've been down, I've met pretty much everyone in the lab, and it's just awesome. I again get inspired because there's a lot of youth, there's a lot of enthusiasm. You guys have all these great ideas. It's never about the ideas, it's about funding those ideas, right? From the philanthropic side. But I guess my question here is like, what's it been for you to be able to do this at Duke? I mean, you've built a lab, you've got Dr. Kanu, who's also a Project Purple recipient. Dr. Nussbaum is down there as well. He's got NIH grants coming in, clinical trials. It's been really probably gratifying for you as a physician and a clinician to be able to do that in a short period of time.
Yeah, so it's been tremendous fun. And getting back to your comment, I want to train people who are going to be surgical oncologists who think about cancer. They do use surgery as their tool. I don't want to train barbers. I've never been to a barber who didn't tell me I needed a haircut. And I think that many times surgeons get a rap for, if you walk into a surgeon's office, you know what they're going to recommend. And many times when I'm trying to get patients not to have an operation, I have to remind them that I actually get paid to operate, not to operate. But that being said, what we ultimately want is we want the best care for the patient with the least amount of intervention, right? These operations that we do, pancreatic surgery, has a lot of risk associated with it and a lot of downstream consequences that we quite frankly want to avoid. So, if we can eliminate pancreatic surgery and the benefit of the patients, then that's a success. It will be like fluoride when the dentist discovered fluoride. But that being said, I want to train people to think about disease and not about surgery. Down here, the talent pool is deep, and it is so much fun being on this campus and having met people like Shama Kanu, who's our mid-level resident, who's now been going on her third year in the lab and done some amazing things, creating unique models of cancer, as well as studying it on an immunologic level with some of our immunologists, which has been tremendous. Dan Nussbaum is doing a great job. He did his training originally here at Duke, but then went to Sloan Kettering for his clinical fellowship and is now down here and has already opened up multiple trials that are receiving significant funding that are actually first in human trials for pancreas cancer. And that's amazing for someone who's just been in practice for 3 or 4 years. So we're really excited. As you mentioned, those are the people that keep me excited. And it's why I like being in an environment like this.
Well, like I said, it's inspiring. I saw it firsthand and had the ability to meet the team there, and it's just awesome. Uh, that you've been able to do so much in such a short period of time, and we are blessed to be able to support your research and all the work you're doing. So, thank you for the opportunity to share all the great things you're doing. I've got one question left, and then we're going to share with our audience where they can learn more. This is always the last question. It's a loaded question. There's no right or wrong, given your experience. How do you define the term pancreatic cancer? How do you see it?
How do I define the term?
Yeah, how do you define it?
Well, when we say pancreatic cancer, we're talking about a very aggressive disease. There are other tumors of the pancreas that are cancerous, but when someone says pancreatic cancer, we're really talking about a cancer that has many unique features to it. It doesn't disobey the rules of cancer, but it has some unique features. And those unique features are early cell dissemination, meaning early on in its development and potentially even before it's really a cancer, it is shedding cells out into the body. It's also a cancer that's been resistant to chemotherapy and immunotherapy. And it's actually a cancer that does not have, that is similar to your own body cells. It has very few mutations in it, which is one of the reasons why early attempts at immunotherapy have not been successful.
Nailed it. Dr. Allen, thank you for all you're doing in the pancreatic cancer space. It is an inspiration, as I've said, to be able to meet you over the couple of years, and we are honored to fund all the great things you're doing and continue to fund the great work you're doing. The future is bright, and as we said, I know, not to sound like a broken record, there's for the audience listening at home or watching that have family members that are either gonna be diagnosed in the future, that are going through it. There's a lot of really, really great things happening. And there's a lot of really, really super talented people like yourself in this space. You guys just need more money. So if people want to donate to Duke and to the great work you're doing there, or learn more about your program, where's the best place for them to do that?
Well, we have a website, Duke PCRL. .com, Pancreatic Cancer Research Lab. There's a site where people can support us on our website, and it will also give you real-time information on what research is going on, who the members of the lab are, and what they're doing, and ongoing clinical trials. So I'd encourage people to take a look, and we're always reach out. We're happy to answer any questions.
Awesome. Dr. Allen, thank you so much for all you're doing, and thank you for being a guest here on the Project Purple podcast.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Project Purple podcast. If you like what you hear today, feel free to share this episode. Make sure to follow the Project Purple podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. Till next time, please be safe, and thanks for listening. That's a wrap of another episode of the Project Purple podcast.